Funding for the Nash Villager podcast comes from the neurosurgeons of the Howell Allen Clinic, national leaders in brain and spine surgery, specializing in laser brain tumor surgery and robotic spine surgery. The Howell Allen Clinic. Your life is our life's work.
This is the Nash Villager podcast. It's August 18th, 2026. At this point in 1909, leaders in Tokyo and Washington, D.C. were sorting out the details of a gift that would permanently enhance the landscape of our nation's capital, 2,000 cherry trees. And the simplified version of the story that you may have heard is that the mayor of Tokyo gave President Taft a bunch of beautiful trees as a goodwill gesture, which now transforms the most significant public areas of D.C. with pink and white blossoms each spring. The more complicated version of it is that a small group of Americans, including the First Lady, have been pushing for more than 25 years for D.C. leaders to plant cherry trees. So while the gift was quite generous, it wasn't exactly an out-of-the-blue idea. And an even bigger complication is that the trees that visitors enjoy there now are not the 2,000 originally given us by Japan. When that first shipment arrived in January of 1910, agriculture inspectors found that they were infested with insects that posed a risk to trees already growing in the U.S. Almost all of them were burned instead of planted. 2 years later, Japan sent another shipment, this time with 3,000 cherry trees. Those passed inspection. A ceremonial planting in March of 1912 set the stage for the present-day Cherry Blossom Festival that happens in D.C. each year. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with context and backstory from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. Trees might still feel like a touchy subject in Nashville. Winter Storm Fern sure did a number on our tree canopy. Most of us can probably remember the exact sound of limbs cracking and falling under the weight of ice. All these months later, Hands on Nashville is still seeking volunteers to finish the job of clearing out down tree debris from the yards of people who don't have the money or physical ability to take care of it themselves. And as we've reported here at WPLN, there's been some heated discussion about changes in Nashville Electric Service's rules that determine if a tree should be trimmed and by how much. The thing is, fall is one of the best times of year to plant new trees, and it's almost here. If your own personal canopy was significantly damaged, you may be interested in filling in some of those newly gaping holes in your yard. But you may also feel a little gun-shy. Before you plant anything that big in Nashville, there are two websites you probably ought to check out. First, NES has a page dedicated to tree trimming rules that also includes some guidelines for planting. There are diagrams showing the radius in which they will eventually trim back limbs. And there's another that shows how far away you should plant a small tree versus a large one. Once you have a sense of what size tree you can plant in the spot you have in mind, you might want to pop over to the website for Metro's Urban Forester. It has some rules everyone should keep in mind, like limits on what may be placed in easements. And amongst all of that, there's a handy list of trees and shrubs that are good choices for here. The list is there to define what developers should and shouldn't plant according to the parameters of their site plan. But it serves as a good list of what serves our canopy well. And it can clarify for you which size category a specific variety tends to belong to. That's especially helpful for species that may grow taller or shorter in certain climate zones. The forester has categorized them according to how big they tend to get here. So if you've realized from the NES site that your spot is really best for a smaller understory tree, you can jump down to that portion of the Urban Forester site and get a list of about 30 different options that should work well. And yes, that does include flowering cherry trees. Of course, anytime you're going to dig in a yard, it's a good idea to call and have all the utilities mark out where their lines run underground. I'll tell you from personal experience that fiber internet lines might not take a straight course to your house, so you'll want to give those markings a wide berth. And yes, I am admitting to having cut mine. Thankfully, it was a quick fix, but it was still annoying. And cracking the water or sewer line would be a much bigger headache. And I can understand if all of these tips make it sound like planting a tree is a headache in and of itself. But they do bring a beauty that lasts far, far longer than the fuss surrounding picking and planting them. And as the Arbor Day Foundation points out, they save energy and fight climate change by making shade, they clean air, support wildlife, and can even increase the resale value of your property. In just a few minutes, some bipartisan unity that we're seeing in the form of opposition to new data centers. That's coming up after the newscast.
Funding for the Nashvillager podcast comes from the neurosurgeons of the Howell Allen Clinic, national leaders in brain and spine surgery, specializing in laser brain tumor surgery and robotic spine surgery. The Howell Allen Clinic. Your life is our life's work.
Way back in 1952, the bronze Mercury statue atop Union Station took a tumble. There's been a replacement up there for the past 30 years, and that prompted the question,
the original, I'm wondering where it could be.
Curious Nashville chases down the old bronze with some twists and turns along the way. Learn more and ask your question at wpln.org/curious.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. The Trump administration is appealing the decision to dismiss the charges against Kilmar Abrego Garcia. A federal judge in Tennessee had found that the government brought the case against the Maryland man only after he won his wrongful deportation case. Immigration officials deported Abrego Garcia to El Salvador last March, despite a court order that he remain in the U.S. over fears of gang violence in his native country. His case became a galvanizing force for critics of the Trump administration's hardline immigration policy. The judge took issue with the delay in prosecution. Prosecutors charged Abrego Garcia with human smuggling based on a 2022 traffic stop in Tennessee. A federal investigation into Abrego Garcia began 2.5 years later, after the Supreme Court ordered he be returned to the U.S. The U.S. Department of Justice filed an appeal yesterday, arguing that the judge did not follow the Supreme Court precedent in his decision. At the same time, a judge in Maryland has ruled that U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement cannot deport Abrego Garcia until at least October. Well, Nashville has filed a lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security over withheld anti-terrorism dollars. Metro is joined by the city of Columbus and 2 Texas counties in the suit, which alleges that the Trump administration is restricting anti-terrorism funding unless states and local governments agree to implement election policies. The grant funding emerged after 9/11 to help localities prevent and respond to terrorist acts. But in June, FEMA placed new eligibility mandates on the funding. These require states to use the Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements system, otherwise known as SAVE, to verify the citizenship of voters and poll workers. The SAVE system, which has mistakenly flagged some foreign-born American citizens as non-citizens, has been found by a federal judge to be unlawful in its current form. The new requirements also mandate changes to electronic voting systems and impose a 5% manual audit of paper ballots. States that do not comply with these conditions will be forced to forfeit 20% of their anti-terrorism grant funding. The lawsuit describes the new conditions as arbitrary and claims that they're in violation of the Constitution, which gives Congress, not the president, the power to set the terms of federal spending. Tennessee's new ban on certain THC products has cost the state more than $54 million in tax revenue so far. WPLN's Mariana Bacchiao reports the ban took effect last month, but the numbers show that deadline had an overall chilling effect on the state's hemp industry.
Tennessee has only collected 3% of the total amount it was anticipating from a new hemp tax. Last year, state lawmakers approved both the new tax and a ban on THCA. That meant an end to the hemp industry's most profitable products like smokable flower and full-spectrum CBD, and an end to many Tennessee businesses. But the chilling effect began earlier this year, creating a $54 million hole in the budget, which so far has been patched by surpluses in business and sales tax. Mariana Bacchiao, WPLN News.
The use of drones by Nashville's police department is drawing more attention from the Metro Council. At tonight's meeting, members will decide whether to move forward with more guardrails for drone usage. This comes after MNPD used a pilot program in the Madison precinct. For WPLN News, Emily West explains what the rules look like.
Metro Police started the pilot program without council approval, a measure members are trying to rectify. Police surveillance has caused frequent debate, and the council has taken several steps to maintain control of what tools are allowed. The legislation proposes that police would only use drones during certain circumstances, like an active shooter incident or a state of emergency. That would be a restriction compared to some of the calls that officers flew drones to during the trial period.
The drone regulations are on second reading. The measure will need a third reading to become law. Metro's Winter Storm Commission has released a first assessment of the city's response during Winter Storm Fern. Nashville's mayor convened the group this past winter after the devastating storm left hundreds of thousands of residents without power. It's called an interim report because their final assessment will be due in February. The group based its findings on public hearings, records, and roughly 60 interviews with agencies, community partners, experts, and residents. The report finds that the city needs to improve its collaboration and communication with the Nashville Electric Service, as well as with non-governmental partners. It also says the city could improve its approach to reaching vulnerable and non-English-speaking communities and recommends Metro conduct a thorough assessment of the Office of Emergency Management. The report did describe the overall storm response as a, quote, strong and tactical one. The commission is continuing its interviews and will expand on the report for its final assessment. A Japanese nuclear company is betting on Tennessee as the hub for fusion power. Kyoto Fusioneering is moving its headquarters to partner with Oak Ridge National Laboratory. WPLN's Caroline Eggers says the company is building a facility where fusion companies can test part of their designs.
Fusion powers the stars across the universe, creating extra energy in the process, which is partially why people have been trying to recreate controlled fusion on Earth. It doesn't produce waste like fission, which powers the nuclear plants we see today. To achieve fusion, researchers use isotopes of hydrogen, deuterium and tritium. Deuterium is naturally abundant, while tritium is quite rare. But we can produce tritium by wrapping a shell containing lithium around a fusion reaction. That shell is called a breeding blanket, and that's where Kyoto Fusioneering comes in. The company is building a particle accelerator with Oak Ridge that will allow researchers to test prototype blankets. This will be an open facility, so any fusion company can test their designs. It'll likely serve as a critical piece in the future of fusion. Caroline Eggers, WPLN News.
WPLN's one-hour radio special, The Debt, just won a National Association of Black Journalists award. The Debt traces Tennessee State University's decades-long fight for fair funding through an overlooked civil rights lawsuit, a historic merger with a predominantly white university, a dramatic student hunger strike, and a lawmaker who discovered his father's old research on underfunding. This weekend, the special garnered a Salute to Excellence award. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Data center proposals are provoking outrage across the region, and the battles, unlike many others in politics, are often bipartisan. For the Appalachia Mid-South Newsroom, Joe Sonka reports on one such example.
The City Council in tiny Bergen, Kentucky held a special meeting in early July where residents could not contain their anger. The council was advancing an ordinance to annex more than 1,000 acres of unincorporated Mercer County farmland, which would double its size. The reason? That's where a developer wants to build a massive hyperscale data center where it would be unencumbered by any city or county zoning rules. The council voted 3-2 to give the annexation its first reading over the objections of residents who were not allowed to speak.
A motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Similar scenes have played out all over Kentucky since last year with increasing frequency. Kentucky passed a new law to give massive state tax breaks to lure the development of data centers, which are the engine of artificial intelligence services pushed by tech company giants. Some welcome data center projects and their promises of major tax revenue for schools and local governments. But it's more commonly met with outright revolt over fears over water and air pollution, noise, or increased electric utility bills.
Greenberg, you can't hide! We demand you take a side! Greenberg!
Louisville Mayor Craig Greenberg is one of dozens of local officials across the state dealing with opposition to proposed data centers. Meanwhile, more than a dozen local governments have passed moratoriums over the past year. That includes big cities like Louisville and small rural communities like Mercer County.
Please do not let the greed of a few outweigh the well-being of our people. Please stop this now. You have a
Roughly 200 opponents showed up in Harrodsburg for a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting in late July. Mercer County is conservative and heavily Republican, but Steve Marshall, a data center opponent from Salvisa, says their coalition has all kinds.
I'm a conservative. This group is made up of, you name it, liberals, conservatives, Republicans, Democrats, libertarians. That should say a lot. That's rare.
That point was highlighted by Dallas Waterfield of Bergen. He mentioned Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez recently holding up jars of dirty water from a well near a Meta data center in Georgia in a congressional hearing.
Even on the news, that AOC, that Cortez woman, she's against it. She had a dirty water in a glass on the national news.
Waterfield says he thinks Ocasio-Cortez is a communist and disagrees with her on almost everything, but not this. On the polar opposite side of the data center issue is President Donald Trump, who won Mercer County with 74% of the vote in 2024.
You have the communities that really want the data centers. And frankly, those are the smart communities.
Last week, data center opponents got a win as the Mercer County government passed a one-year moratorium on data centers. The problem? That would not apply to Bergen. After a packed council meeting where more than a dozen Bergen residents spoke in opposition, a vote was delayed on annexation. Interim Mayor Joe Monroe says the developer would have to make its case in order to win support. He says the data center fight has gotten ugly over the summer with threats lodged at public officials.
This fussing and fighting. If this keeps up, we're going to have to take that sign down at the city limits that says this is a friendly little city. Because right now it ain't no friendly little city.
Patatoni, the company behind the data center and annexation plan, did not agree to an interview request about the project. I'm Joe Sonka in Bergen.
We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday, so subscribe in your favorite podcasting app to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you like this, you'll probably enjoy the Nash Villager newsletter, too. Look up Perspective from more of my colleagues at Nashville Public Radio and links to the stories we're following. Sign up for those daily emails at wpln.org/NashVillager. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.
Tennessee has only collected 3% of the total amount it was anticipating from a new hemp tax. Last year, state lawmakers approved both the new tax and a ban on THCA. That meant an end to the hemp industry's most profitable products like smokable flower and full-spectrum CBD, and an end to many Tennessee businesses. But the chilling effect began earlier this year, creating a $54 million hole in the budget, which so far has been patched by surpluses in business and sales tax. Mariana Baca-Yao, WPLN News.
Funding for the Nash Villager podcast comes from the neurosurgeons of the Howell Allen Clinic, national leaders in brain and spine surgery, specializing in laser brain tumor surgery and robotic spine surgery. The Howell Allen Clinic. Your life is our life's work.